She's not a real leader anymore, just a washed-up old man who left his company accounts wide open while playing hero overseas. Let me handle the money. You clearly can't. That was the last sentence my business partner ever said to me with a smile on his face. I looked at him across the ballroom of the National Military Honors Ceremony under crystal lights and American flags with 400 decorated veterans watching, and I answered him so quietly that only he could hear it. You underestimated a general. That was your final mistake. If you came here for a soft story, leave now. If you have ever trusted the wrong person with your savings, your business, or your name on a joint account, stay. Hit like if betrayal ever wore a familiar face. Subscribe if you believe integrity still has teeth. And drop a comment with the word general if you want the full truth. Because what happened next did not stay private. Not for him, not for me, not for anyone in that room. Rewind 48 hours. My name is General Marcus Hale, United States Army, retired. 32 years in uniform, 2 combat tours, 1 Purple Heart, 3 decades of learning that the most dangerous enemy is rarely the one holding a rifle. Sometimes it is the man who shakes your hand, calls you brother, and co-signs the paperwork while you are still in the air over another continent. I built Iron Ridge Logistics after I left active duty, a mid-sized defense contracting and supply company outside Fort Belvoir, Virginia. Clean books, clean reputation, veterans on half the payroll. I poured my retirement, my savings, and every ounce of discipline I had left into that firm. My partner was Derek Vaughn, civilian, sharp suit, sharper tongue. He handled client dinners and growth strategy, while I handled operations, compliance, and the kind of quiet leadership that does not need a microphone. For 6 years, it worked. Then, I left for a 2-week humanitarian advisory mission in Eastern Europe, unpaid, volunteer, the kind of work that does not make headlines but still needs a man who knows how to move people and pallets under pressure. Before I boarded, Derek clapped my shoulder in the hangar and said the company was safe in his hands. I believed him. That was my first failure as a general in civilian clothes. I landed back at Dulles on a gray Thursday morning. My phone had 12 missed calls from our chief financial officer, a former Army captain named Rivera. I called her from the taxi. Her voice was flat in the way soldiers get when the news is already bad. "Sir, the primary operating account is nearly empty. Secondary reserves touched. Payroll is 72 hours from failure." I did not raise my voice. I did not swear. I asked for numbers. She gave them. $840,000 moved in staggered withdrawals over 11 days, routed through a vendor shell that did not exist last month, authorized with my credentials, my password, my dual control approval code. Except I had been on another continent with no secure access to those systems. I went straight to the office. The glass doors still had my name on them, Hale and Vaughn, equal partners on the letterhead. Inside, the hallway smelled of coffee and printer heat. People looked at me the way junior officers look at a commander who just walked into a ruined after-action report. Respect mixed with fear. Nobody wanted to be the first to speak. Rivera met me with a folder. Bank statements, timestamps, IP logs, and one sentence that changed the temperature in my chest. "Sir, there is also the Lottie camera." We went to the security closet. Old building, reliable system. I had insisted on cameras after a break-in 3 years ago. Derek had called it paranoid. I had called it standard operating procedure. We pulled the footage from the night of the largest transfer. There he was, Derek Vaughn, alone in my office at 11:14 p.m. Blazer off, sleeves rolled, sitting in my chair like it had always been his. He opened my laptop, typed, paused, checked his phone, typed again. On the edge of the frame, he flipped through a notepad I kept locked in the left drawer, the drawer only 3 people had ever opened, myself, Rivera, and Derek, because I had trusted him with contingency access during my last medical leave. He smiled at the screen when the transfer cleared. Signed, Confirmed. Gone. I watched that clip 4 times without blinking. Rivera stood beside me in silence. When the video ended the 4th time, she said what every good officer eventually says when the chain of command is contaminated. "What are your orders, sir?" I did not call Derek. I did not storm into his house. I did not tip the board. I opened a clean legal pad and wrote 3 words at the top. Secure, document, contain. Then I called my attorney. Then I called the bank's commercial fraud unit. Then I called a man I had not spoken to in 14 months, General Arthur Klein, former mentor, still active in the old network of flag officers who understand that some wars are fought with affidavits instead of artillery. Arthur listened. Arthur did not waste sympathy. Arthur said one thing: if the paper trail is clean, the room will do the rest. By Friday morning, the operating account was frozen pending investigation. Temporary credit lines secured against my personal assets so payroll would not bounce. Quiet holds placed on outgoing wires. A forensic accountant embedded with Rivera. And one sealed envelope locked in my briefcase containing a document Derek had never been meant to see. The reading of my late uncle's private instrument. The one that made me sole executor and controlling beneficiary of the Hale Family Holdings Trust. The trust that quietly owned 51% of Iron Ridge through a holding company Derek had always believed was passive capital from old family friends. He had never asked the right questions. I had never corrected him. That was not deception. That was operational security. Saturday night was the National Military Honor Ceremony at the Grand Dominion Ballroom in Arlington. Black tie, medals, a ballroom full of men and women who had carried the flag through places the evening news forgot. I was scheduled to receive a lifetime service commendation for post-retirement veteran employment work. Derek had bought a table. Of course he had. Visibility was his favorite currency. He found me near the coat check before the program began. He looked rested, expensive, untouched by the kind of week I had just lived. "Marcus, you look tired. Jet lag is brutal at your age. Listen, about the accounts, there were some aggressive reallocations while you were gone, growth moves. You would have approved if you understood the market window. You have been away from the real world too long. Let me handle the money. You clearly can't." He said it loud enough for 2 nearby couples to hear. One of them laughed under his breath. I felt the old heat rise behind my ribs, the kind that used to come before a breach. I let it pass through me like weather. I did not argue. I straightened my cuffs. I looked him in the eye and said nothing that would give him altitude. He mistook silence for surrender. He always had. If you have ever stood in a room while someone rewrote your worth out loud, type "I understand" in the comments. Do it now, because what comes next only lands if you know that feeling in your bones. The ceremony began on schedule. Colors presented, national anthem, speeches that meant something because the people giving them had paid for the right to speak. I sat at table 6 with Rivera, 2 retired colonels from my old division, and an empty chair Arthur Klein was supposed to fill. Derek sat 2 tables over, laughing too easily, raising a glass every time a camera pointed near him. At one point, he leaned to a congressman's aide and gestured in my direction, like he was explaining a problem that needed managing. I checked my watch. 20 minutes to my commendation. My phone vibrated once against my leg. A message from Arthur. "In the building. Package ready. On your signal." I typed back 1 word. Hold. The MC called my name. General Marcus Hale. The room stood. I walked to the stage under lights that made every metal in the crowd look like small fires. The presenter spoke about service beyond the uniform, about building companies that hired the people the country trained and then forgot, about quiet leadership. They handed me the award. Glass, heavy, cold. I accepted it. I stepped to the microphone. and I did not give the speech they printed in the program. I thanked the organizers. I thanked the veterans in the room. Then I said I needed 30 seconds of the evening for a matter of honor. A murmur moved through the ballroom like wind through dry grass. I looked at the technical director in the wing and nodded once. The main screen behind me switched from the ceremony logo to a freeze frame of my office at night. Derek Vaughn at my desk. Timestamp visible. Transfer confirmation visible in enhanced inset. The room went silent in stages. First the front tables, then the middle, then the back where people were whispering about dessert. I spoke evenly. 11 days ago, while I was overseas on unpaid advisory work, $840,000 was removed from Iron Ridge Logistics operating accounts with my credentials. The man on this screen is my business partner, Derek Vaughn. The bank has frozen the remaining assets. Forensic review is active, and every person in this room deserves to know that the company bearing my name was not mismanaged by an old soldier who forgot how money works. It was looted. Derek stood up so fast his chair screamed against the floor. "That is a lie. That is edited. Marcus, you are embarrassing yourself. Sit down before you make this worse." I did not sit. I did not raise my voice. I advanced the footage. Derek entering the password. Derek confirming the wire. Derek smiling. Signed. Confirmed. Gone. Someone in the second row said, "Dear God," loud enough to carry. Derek started toward the stage. Two event security officers shifted, uncertain. Before they needed to decide, the ballroom doors at the rear opened hard to echo. General Arthur Klein walked in wearing full-dress blues. Not retired posture, active authority. Beside him were two civilian attorneys with document cases and a representative from the commercial bank's fraud division I had met Friday morning. Behind him, almost unnoticed until the light caught the badge on his belt, was a detective from the Financial Crimes Unit. Arthur did not hurry. He never hurried. He walked the center aisle like a man inspecting a formation and stopped at the base of the stage. Permission to approach General Hale. Granted. He climbed the steps, shook my hand once, and turned to the microphone with the ease of someone who had briefed presidents and still hated microphones. "Ladies and gentlemen, I will be brief. General Hale asked me to verify facts, not speeches. I have done so." He opened the first folder. The withdrawals match Mr. Vaughn's physical access, device fingerprint, and known vendor routing. The shell company used as the receiving entity was registered 9 days before the first transfer under an alias linked to Mr. Vaughn's brother-in-law. The dual control code was lifted from a contingency packet General Hale issued under restricted protocol. That packet was signed out by Mr. Vaughn the morning General Hale departed. Derek's face had gone the color of old paper. Arthur continued. "There is a second matter. Mr. Vaughn has spent the last 48 hours telling select investors that General Hale is cognitively unfit to retain control and that an emergency buyout was imminent. Those conversations were recorded by two of the investors, both veterans in this room, who found the pitch distasteful enough to forward. A man at table 11 stood up and held up his phone without being asked. 'I have the voicemail,' he said. He called Marcus a mascot with a pension." The sound that moved through the ballroom then was not shock, it was judgment. Derek pointed at me, voice cracking into something mean. "You set me up. You wanted me out. You never respected what I built while you were off playing soldier for free. That company grew because of me. You were a name on the door, a relic, an old man who confuses medals with market share." I stepped back to the microphone. I did not answer the insult. I answered the ledger. "Iron Ridge did not grow because you drained it.
Iron Ridge grew because men and women who served this country packed crates at 0400 without being asked twice. Because Rivera caught errors you called nitpicking, because contracts were clean, because I signed every line I was willing to defend in court. I opened my own folder. And because you never understood the ownership structure you were trying to steal, I held up the trust instrument. Hale Family Holdings controls 51% of Iron Ridge through a silent majority stake. I am sole executor and controlling beneficiary. I have been since my uncle's death 4 years ago. You were never buying me out, Derek. You were embezzling from a company you did not have the votes to take. The bank representative stepped forward and confirmed the freeze, the flagged transfers, and the pending civil recovery actions in language plain enough for every spouse in the room to understand. The detective stated that a formal interview would follow and that Mr. Vaughn was advised not to leave the district. One of the attorneys placed a temporary restraining packet on the podium related to company access, devices, and remaining accounts. Derek laughed once, ugly, small. You think this little show ends me? I have lawyers. I have friends. I built relationships in this town while you were polishing boots and talking about honor like it pays rent. Arthur looked at him the way winter looks at an unlocked door. Your friends are seated in this room. Count how many are meeting your eyes. Derek turned. He searched the tables. Men he had golfed with found their water glasses fascinating. A woman who had laughed at his jokes all season studied the program like it contained survival instructions. The congressman's aide was already on his phone, angled away, erasing association in real time. That is when Derek made the mistake angry men always make when the perimeter collapses. He lunged for the narrative. He shouted that I had abandoned the business, that volunteer missions were vanity, that a retired general had no business touching modern capital, that I used military theater to assassinate a civilian partner's reputation. I let him finish. Then I said the only sentence that still mattered. Camera, bank, trust, chain of custody. 4 nouns, no adjectives. The truth does not need decoration when the room can see the timestamp. Event leadership asked Derek to leave. He refused. Security escorted him. He did not go quietly. He called me a fraud on the way up the aisle. He told Rivera she would never work in Virginia again. He told Arthur this was a coup dressed in medals. At the doors, he turned for one last shot, voice high enough to break. You are finished in this town, Hale. I did not answer him. The doors closed. Gone. For a moment, nobody moved. Then a retired sergeant major in the 3rd row began to clap, not loud, steady, the kind of clap that's really a verdict. It spread in uneven waves until the ballroom sounded like weather returning after a long hold. I did not smile. I thanked the room for their patience. I completed the original thank you I had abandoned, shorter now, stripped to bone. I dedicated the award to every veteran on my payroll who showed up early and left late and never confused loyalty with silence. Then I left the stage with Arthur on my right and Rivera on my left. In the corridor outside the ballroom, the noise of the room became a muffled sea. Arthur handed me the second envelope. Full civil filing ready Monday morning. Criminal referral already with the right desk. Your majority control letter hits the board at 0800. He'll try to panic sell personal assets. He will fail. The freeze is wider than he thinks. I nodded. Rivera wiped one eye without apology and asked if payroll was still covered. It was. She saluted out of habit, caught herself halfway, and laughed once through the leftover adrenaline. Sorry, sir, muscle memory. Keep it, I said. Some reflexes deserve to stay. Monday arrived like a clean inspection. Derek's company credentials were revoked before sunrise, building access terminated, board notified, clients called personally by me, one by one, with facts instead of spin. 2 threatened to pull contracts after the ceremony footage hit a regional business desk. Both stayed when they saw the forensic summary and the majority control documentation. One sent a note that said simply, "Good hunting." By Wednesday, Derek's attorneys requested a sealed settlement conversation. I refused sealed. I allowed structured. He would resign all titles immediately. He would surrender any claimed equity pending court determination. He would accept a full accounting and disgorgement process for the diverted funds. He would issue no public statement framing himself as a partner wronged by military theater. He signed because the alternative was a slower destruction in open court with the same video playing for a jury who never wore a uniform and still understood theft when it smiled at a laptop at 11:14 p.m. Signed, transferred, removed. The company did not die, it tightened. We promoted Rivera to Chief Operating Officer. We hired a second forensic-friendly controller. We rewrote contingency access so that no single charming partner could ever again confuse proximity with ownership. I walked the warehouse floor on Friday and shook every hand on first shift. Nobody asked for a speech. They wanted eye contact and a payroll date they could trust. I gave them both.
Derek lost the company. He also lost the social architecture he thought was permanent. The club membership went quiet. The charity board seats evaporated. A profile piece that had been in draft after rising civilian defense entrepreneurs was killed after the ceremony. Public shame is not a legal remedy. It is still a consequence. He had built his life on being seen as the smartest man in rooms full of people he underestimated. Once the rooms saw him clearly, there was no version of the old performance left to run. I did not attend his lowest day. I did not need to. The mission was recovery, not spectacle. Weeks later, I sat alone in my office after everyone had gone home. Same desk Derek had used like a trophy. Same drawer. Same camera in the corner with its small, honest light. On the desk were 3 objects: the award from the ceremony, the trust instrument, and a printed still from the security footage face down. I turned the still over once, looked at it, and filed it in the evidence binder where it belonged. Not as a trophy, as a reminder. People think generals win by volume, by rank, by the ability to fill a room with fear. That is a civilian cartoon of command. Real command is quieter. It is the discipline to gather facts while your pride is screaming for a scene. It is the patience to let a traitor complete his own signature on the page that ends him. It is the refusal to become chaotic just because someone else decided your integrity was an outdated operating system. Derek did not fall because I hated him. He fell because he confused my silence with emptiness. He saw a retired officer and calculated weakness. He saw volunteer service and calculated vanity. He saw shared accounts and calculated opportunity. He never saw the structure underneath. He never saw the mentors who still answered late calls. He never saw the staff who documented instead of gossiped. He never saw that a man trained to secure a perimeter does not stop securing it because the threat now wears cologne and talks about market windows. If you are listening to this with a knot in your stomach because someone in your life has access they have not earned, hear me clearly. Audit while you can still breathe. Document before you confront. Do not hand your self-respect to the person already spending it. And if they mock your caution, remember what caution really is. It is not fear. It is pre-combat checks. I kept the company. I kept the trust. I kept the men and women who refused to look away when the numbers turned ugly. Derek kept the lesson he tried to outrun. You can borrow a soldier's credibility for a little while. You cannot spend it forever without the bill coming due in a room full of witnesses. Integrity is not decoration on a dress uniform. It is a weapon. Slow, heavy, exact. And when someone uses your honor as camouflage for theft, they should not be surprised when that same honor becomes the instrument that strips them down to what they always were. Not partners, not visionaries, just opportunists who mistook discipline for decay. I stood, locked the office, and walked into the Virginia night with the award under my arm and the city lights scattered like distant signal fires. Somewhere behind me, a camera kept watching an empty chair. Somewhere across town, a man who once smiled at a confirmed wire was learning the specific silence that follows public exposure. Ahead of me was a company that still had work to do, and a name I could still wear without flinching. That was enough. If this story hit a nerve, hit like so the next person who needs it actually finds it. Subscribe if you want more true-to-the-bone accounts of financial betrayal meeting unfashionable backbone. Drop General in the comments if you stayed until the end. And if someone you trusted ever emptied what you built while calling you outdated, tell me how you took the ground back. The paper trail remains. The perimeter holds. Dismissed.